Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with the 120, what is it, fourth, I think, Zoom Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Zoom call.
214.
214, oh my God, how time flies. It's been 5 years. It'll be 5 years next month, actually, for these calls. We are joined by the great Mimi German, our Poet Laureate, and by Andrea Miller, one of the world's most advanced organizers. So glad to have both of you with us. In the second half hour, we're going to talk about DC, the Washington, D.C. Home rule. Giant step backwards. We used to be talking about statehood. Now it's home rule. In the third half hour, at the top of the hour, 6 o'clock Pacific time, we're going to be with CAMILLA REES, and we're going to talk about some new scientific findings on electromagnetic frequencies and a very tangible campaign to reverse the Telecommunications Act of Clinton Gore and allow local communities to evaluate cell towers based on health concerns. This is a long overdue campaign, and we're very happy to have it here. Fourth half hour, we're going to go to the discussion of computerizing rallies, how people at mass rallies, and we're expecting a bunch of them this summer, can use their cell phones and do the kind of organizing that has not been present at so many rallies before, but is finally starting to take hold. So that's our four-part series here. I do want to honor a man named James Harrison. He was 88 years old in Australia, and I just read about him in the Times. He donated blood 1,173 times, this guy, because he had a certain gene in his blood that saved literally hundreds of thousands of lives. He donated every 2 weeks from 1954 to 2018. And it puts me to shame because I have O positive blood, but I hate needles. I think in his honor, I'm going to have to start donating. Anyway, listen, we also want to honor a woman who was killed yesterday in Ukraine, a journalist. I cannot pronounce her name, I'm sorry, by a drone. It's infuriating. They do target journalists, and this woman was really killed. If anybody knows and can pronounce her name, that would be great. Okay, we're going to start now as we love to. There she is. Tetiana Kulik. We are so sorry what happened to you. It's outrageous. This war needs to stop. And I do want to point out that in the 1990s, Ukraine, having inherited a whole bunch of nuclear weapons from the old Soviet Union. Yes, they killed her husband too. Ukraine inherited the nuclear weapons from the Soviet Union, and then in a treaty gave up those nuclear weapons to Russia. And Russia signed a treaty in the 1990s guaranteeing the sovereignty of Ukraine for time to come. And I have seen very little mention of this treaty anywhere in the coverage of the war in Ukraine. So, I'm going to do a piece about it, but it's outrageous. All right, listen, we're going to proceed now. Mimi German with your wonderful poem, as always. You're in, and then Andrea Miller. We're so honored to have you with us. Go ahead, Mimi.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. This is a poem for Leonard Peltier. It's called Time is an Object Worth Breaking. Between Nazi salutes and the new dawn of kings, azaleas pregnant in red skirts cluster on the corners of thirst and hunger. Seagulls rise in salted breath, delirious in song, hearing of your return. Down from the mountains, up from the deserts, across the canyons and springs of blossoming fields, the people come to remember what was forgotten, remnants of something wild, seed of fading flower, musket of scented freedom. Liberation whirls through rushes of thirsty rivers. Learn the names of birds by the songs they sing. Taste language rooted to the tongue. Here you are free.
Oh my God, thank you. Can we show again the picture of Leonard sitting in his home with his relative there? Would be great. Thank you, Mimi, for that. You are in your home in Portland, I see. I have sat on that couch. And it's great to have you. Here's Leonard Peltier. God love him, sitting in his home with a relative after 50 years in prison. Oh my God. Listen, thank you so much, Hetty, for providing that, Steve, for flashing on. Mimi, your poems are always great. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
We have 93 people with us. I want to tell everybody we're taking special precautions today because the PDA Zoom call yesterday was bombed, Zoom bombed, and we want to take precautions. Much as I'm sure everybody wants to see porn, we don't want to see it flashed on in the middle of our call here, especially with the great Andrea Miller coming on. Andrea, you've got 20 minutes or so to tell us what you're doing, and then we'll take questions and comments on what you got to say. Thank you, Andrea, for being with us.
Well, thank you very much, Harvey. Thank you, the entire Greek community. I am delighted to be here. Normally, when I speak, my talks don't have a name, but I am giving these talks a name. The name of my talk today is Despair is Not a Strategy, Using Elections as Resistance. So many of you know that what I do at Center for Common Ground is we turn out the BIPOC vote, Black, Indigenous, people of color, generally in voter suppression states, most of which are in the South. However, we are working in Wisconsin, which congressionally is an exceedingly gerrymandered state. And if any of you remember Scott Walker, Wisconsin was also a tremendously voter suppressed state. So we are working very, very hard in these special state elections in 2025 to basically throw water on President Musk's money and Mr. Trump's blithering nonsense. So in Wisconsin, we are working on the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We have already sent out 94,000 postcards to Black voters in Milwaukee, Racine, Waukesha, and Madison. Now, the thing to know about Wisconsin is there are 201,000 Black voters in Wisconsin, registered voters. Only 94,000 of them are still active. So again, there has been major voter purging in Wisconsin. So we are urging everyone constantly check your voter registration and make sure that registration is still active. For states that don't have same-day registration, if you show up to vote during early voting or on election day, and there is no same-day registration, and your registration, you are not registered, they are going to send you home. Or if they're nice and they let you vote a provisional ballot, they're not going to count it. This happened in Georgia. It happened in Ohio, Pennsylvania. There were huge purges of voters. We worked on notifying voters. We did not get them all. A number of voters that did show up discovered they were no longer registered. Now, in Virginia, we pay very, very careful attention to what is going on in the rest of the world. And in Virginia, we passed a bill that said only the voters themselves can unregister. So in Virginia, we have a law that says you cannot show up at the Board of Elections with a list of names and tell anybody to unregister these people and expect anything to happen other than they're going to tell you to get out. Now, what is interesting is we pass that bill in the General Assembly, will our governor sign it? Maybe yes, maybe no. So anyway, elections as resist. We need to start handing crazy people some major, major losses. So in Wisconsin, we are running national guided phone banks every Tuesday and every Wednesday. So if you want to get in and call Black voters in Wisconsin and let them know that there is a Supreme Court election on April Fool's Day, and it is very important that they go out and they vote. The Supreme Court will be hearing cases on congressional gerrymandering. Right now, the Wisconsin congressional delegation is 2 Democrats and 6 Republicans. If the maps were fair, Wisconsin would probably be 4-4. The Supreme Court will also be hearing cases on funding public education. They will also be hearing cases on an 1876 law that bans abortion in all cases, and who knows what else might end up before the courts. We are very, very encouraged because the voters we have spoken with, they are aware that the election is there and they intend to vote. So a tremendous opportunity to keep progressives in charge of the court in Wisconsin. Now, Virginia also has elections in 2025. We have all 3 statewide elections. We have governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. And we also have all 100 of our House of Delegate races. When I look at the races that are there in Virginia, I am looking at working to pick up 60 seats. Now, there are 10 seats that we are going to have to really work for. Right now, the Virginia House is 51-49. So picking up 10 seats would make it 60, or picking up 9 seats would make it 60-40. And Virginia would be that stalwart state where we have some of the best voting laws in the country. And what we are going to start doing here in Virginia is gathering up the best of our voting laws and sharing those bills with neighboring states, saying, get these introduced in your state house. You're not going to be able to pass them now. That's okay. But give people something to aspire to. Give them a reason to want to have a progressive General Assembly that wants to do the will of the people. And then also, we are working against the passage of the SAVE Act, where basically it will disenfranchise anybody who can't come up with proof of citizenship, i.e., your birth certificate in the case, or passport, and it must be active, can't be expired, or in the case of married women, if you were silly enough to change your name to your husband's name, you will basically need a passport because the name on your birth certificate must match the name you are currently using.
Wow.
So I'm going to stop there.
That's an incredible rundown. We had a discussion yesterday on the PDA call about disenfranchisement and the role it played in the 24 election. Greg Palast, as you know, has asserted that
Yes.
more than 10 million people were disenfranchised, mostly people of color, women, young people and suspected Democrats. We have 101 people with us, by the way. Yeah, and Andrea, this is still an ongoing discussion, but
Yes.
clearly, if things are to change in the other direction in this country, people are going to have to be able to vote. Now, with your help, we put up a guide to protecting elections, which is on our website, and which we need to promote. But your work ongoing, how can people plug in with you? And then we'll go to Mimi German and LYNN FEINERMAN.
All right, I'm going to drop a couple of links into the chat. We will be making postcards available for Virginia. We're going to have about, I think, almost 200,000 for the Virginia primary, which is June 17th. And then phone banks are going on right now for Wisconsin. So I'm going to give you that link in the chat as well. So we call them national guided phone banks, and they are every Tuesday. Our partners at Bay Area Coalition run them, and then we run them every Wednesday. Now, people love our phone bank. We have a manual dialer, meaning the dialer doesn't run away with you. You click the button when you're ready to dial. All the calls are made from your computer. That means you never have to be concerned that somebody is going to get your phone number. And I see I've got a couple of questions.
Yes,
So,
Mimi German and LYNN FEINERMAN, thank you for that
yeah.
answer. I did your phone banking. I was walking on the beach and I used my phone, and there we were. Mimi German, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I did your phone banking too, and it was great. So just saying, it was so easy, and I am technically unsavvy, so I really appreciated the ease in which I could connect with people. But that's not my question. In all of the areas where people really need to find out if they are still eligible to vote as the voting records stand, is there an effort to get through to churches, alternative newspapers, things like that, where the word can start getting out now so that
yes. And again, because we predominantly this year are turning out Black voters, we are partnered with a multitude of churches, and we encourage every year our churches to make sure that every one of your members are actively registered to vote. There are 3 statuses for voter registration. Active, you are free to go in that booth and vote for the candidate of your choice. Inactive, that gets really squishy. In some states, inactive voters have to re-register. That's the case in Wisconsin and Virginia. In other states like Georgia, you can just call your local registrar and go, hey, make me active again. So it varies wildly. And then the final version is deregistered, meaning you are no longer registered to vote in that.
Well, I want to point out what the stakes are. You've got this Supreme Court race. Wisconsin is a 50-50 Republican Democrat state, and yet 6 of the 8 Congress people are Republican. Now, if that changed to 4 and 4, the whole national Congress would be changed, or evened out. So, and we had this in Ohio for years. We passed 2 anti-gerrymandering referenda, and we won continually at the Supreme Court, and yet they continue to gerrymander. It's really, really mind-boggling. Thank you for that, and thank you, LYNN, Mimi, for your call. LYNN FEINERMAN, go ahead, please. Mimi, are you satisfied?
Hey, LYNN.
Hey,
Hey, LYNN.
hey,
Hey.
hello, beautiful ladies. I just wanted to say that yes, the phone banking system for Andrea's group is wonderful. It's really easy to use, and I am also a techno peasant, so I really enjoyed working with it. My other thing is just a personal thing. Mimi German said hi to me, and I have been chat disabled and unable to turn on my video. So I just want to say hi back, Mimi.
Okay. Well, as we said, the PDA call was Zoom bombed
Zoom
yesterday,
bombed.
so we're being very careful today. Lynn and I, there you go. Maybe at least we got you in audio wise. The video is a little random right now. We have 102 people with us. John Seeley, go ahead. Then Ruth Strauss and Tyler Ackerson. Good to see Ray McClendon. Ray, we haven't seen you for a while.
Hey, Ray.
Good to see, bro. And remember that this issue, really, people should see Vigilantes Inc., Greg Palast's film about how they've disenfranchised many, many, many people in Georgia. It was it remains Greg Palast's assertion that if it wasn't for mass disenfranchisement, that the election would have been very different. John Seeley, go ahead, please.
Well, thanks for what you're doing, Andrea. I just wanted to say a word or two about Wisconsin, where, I think this is a vital race about the Supreme Court. And I just hope that folks are tuning in to another minority community there, the Polish community, which is huge in Milwaukee. And the Poles, both in Poland, particularly in Poland, are just outraged at what acting President Musk is doing to Zelensky and the Ukraine and the whole pro-Russian tilt of the administration. So I hope that word is getting out there among the Poles who've historically been very anti-Russian and doing some anti-Musk, anti-Trump, anti-Vance propaganda about their Putin puppeteering.
Yes, Poland was the first country after the debacle in the Oval Office to come out in support of Zelensky. Very interesting. Of course, you have to remember Poland, according to Trump's view, Poland attacked Nazi Germany on September 1st, 1939, leading to World War II with the cavalry. The cavalry went pouring in to Nazi Germany, and the Germans had no choice but to retaliate. That's the view of, again, we just came up, I was just looking up this treaty that was signed. Ukraine actually had the third most nuclear weapons in the world in 1994. And they gave them all up. They gave them to Russia, as a matter of fact, in exchange for a pledge to not invade. And here we are. Andrea, are you speaking? No. Okay, Ruth Strauss, Tyler Ackerson, Marion, and Patricia. Go ahead, Ruth. I got to unmute you. Again, we're being very cautious today because PDA was Zoom bombed yesterday. I can't get Ruth. Ruth, are you unmuted? Tyler, let's try you. You got to unmute yourself. There we go.
Thank you guys for letting me on. I hope we get
Tyler, go ahead very quickly. Go
Yep.
ahead, Tyler, then we'll go back to Dr. Ruth.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for letting me on. I'm glad that we're able to have community interaction again. Joining the PDA call yesterday was pretty disappointing with the breakdown, so hopefully we're able to get
Yes,
clear
we're good. So what do
technology.
you got for Andrea Miller?
I just want to talk about policies that we can do to move away from winner-take-all elections that create gerrymandering as a required race-like setup in all of these state elections. Is that something that we're willing to push and change the narrative? So instead of it being 8 separate races in Wisconsin, it's one statewide race that can break down on a representative basis. As someone who pushes and understands gerrymandering strongly, as long as there's individual districts, we'll be stuck with people trying to manipulate the rules, and third parties will never have an access to be able to represent people who feel disenfranchised with the current system.
All right, well, that's an interesting point. And I know Andrea has to go. We got a lot of people that want to. So, Tyler, if you'll bring that up at a future Zoom call, that's an interesting point we can deal with. Okay? Thank you for that. And do come back and join us again, and we'll talk about that. Ruth Strauss, Marion Edey, Patricia, and Valerie. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you
we
hear
can.
me?
Go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, great. 2 quickies. One is, I'm sorry. What is Zoom bombed? I'm sorry. I was
You don't
at a
want to
protest.
know. It's when
Yes.
somebody gets into your Zoom call and puts on stuff that really disrupts.
Okay,
Until
okay, fine.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, Andrea, I totally say what LYNN FEINERMAN is. I always joke and say I've operated an electron microscope, but I find faxing and joining Zoom meetings very challenging. But anyway, are you doing a call-in thing for Wisconsin? My internet connection was kind of in and
Yes.
out.
Yes.
Oh,
And
you
where
are?
is
Okay,
it, Andrea?
so
Yes.
I'm on your list, so I'll get an email on how to join.
No, that is not what we do.
Okay.
I put the link in the chat. Go to
Okay.
that link and sign up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Ruth.
Ruth. We appreciate it. Always great to have you. Marion Edey. Marion, go ahead.
Okay, so two things. First of all, I would like to have, maybe you could put it in the chat, the contact information if somebody wants to donate money in the Wisconsin judicial election. I'd like us all to have that, to know where we could do that.
Okay, we'll take care of that. Marion is a donor, and great to have you with us, Marion. And anything else beyond that? We'll make sure
Not
we
much
get
of a
that.
donor. I would say a weird thought that I had, and everybody is probably going to throw up their hands, but given the gerrymandering, and I so much agree with the previous caller that it not only is it bad in all the way he says it drives extremism. All these Republicans are so terrified of Trump because their primaries are more competitive than the general. In some states, in some congressional districts, it would make sense for people to register as a Republican because those are the only meaningful elections happening in those states. And we see fascism growing because they're all afraid of being attacked on the right. That's just a out of the box kind of thought. But I'm prepared to help in Wisconsin. That's all.
That's a good idea. We are nonpartisan, so I'm sure we have plenty of Republicans with us. But Marion, good to hear from you again. Thank you. Patricia Gratian, and then Valerie O'Cornelius. Go ahead,
Thank
Patricia.
you very much. Thank you. I've been very distressed about everything we're going through, and also our elections. And it's not just their gerrymandering, as you know. The MAGA people stole the election equipment right after the previous election of 2020. Therefore, they have compromised Dominion software and ESNS software. And what I would like for us to explore is if there is another company that is not compromised that we could trade out, we could throw out both Dominion and ESNS out of our elections because they are compromised. We need a totally different way of counting our votes if we are to succeed. I'm very, very disturbed about this.
Well, we of course. What was the title of your talk again, Andrea? Despair.
Despair is not a strategy. Using elections as resistance.
So that's good points on the machines. Personally, the machine I prefer is Scott paper.
Yes, that is what we have in Virginia, which is why they could not steal Virginia.
Well, good for you, and we know you had a lot to do with that. Thank you. Thanks for the call. Valerie, you were unmuted, and now you're not. MYLA, are you unmuted? Valerie, go ahead. Go ahead, then MYLA.
I've been reading that Musk is supporting financially the Republican candidate for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. Is that being advertised to the voters in Wisconsin?
Yes, it is.
Good.
Thank you for that, Valerie. It's a good point. In this country right now, since Citizens United, at least, we have a system of $1, one vote. And, apparently Elon Musk has 400 billion of them. And then what's his name? Bezos and Zuckerberg. I mean, I saw Bernie Sanders' speech lately, and thank God for Bernie Sanders, pointing out that those three guys have the wealth equivalent of 170 million Americans. Half the United States has wealth, and then equal wealth is in the hands of those three guys. So there you go. And if you look at their yachts, they look like battleships. It's outrageous. MYLA Rees, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to say that perhaps the Progressive magazine and Norm Stockwell might be a wonderful guest to have to talk again about the Wisconsin election that's coming up on April 1st. I know that when we spoke to him when he visited Southern California recently, he wasn't feeling particularly optimistic about that race. And so I'm glad, Andrea, that you're working on it. And I think that if you I think it was Marion Eddy who asked about who to contribute to, and I think that if we have Norm on, maybe he can point people in the right direction.
Yes, that's a good idea. Thank you so much for that. And last week, of course, we had Jennifer Roberts, who says that the judicial race in North Carolina, which was decided in favor of the Democrat by a few hundred votes, very close, the Republican is now trying to preempt, to disenfranchise in reverse people who have already voted and to have their votes discarded. So that's something to look into also. Paul Newman.
And Harvey, that is a test case. That is a test case because they are looking at, should they somehow win the day on that? If they pass this AVAT, they would potentially go back and say, who are all the people who voted, who did not provide proof of citizenship? We should throw their votes.
Yep, these guys have no shame, and they're certainly not about to stop soon. Paul Newman and Steve Caruso, and we actually have Senator Mike Brown on with us to talk about home rule in D.C. Go ahead, Paul, and then Steve. And then
First, I just want to talk about, there's such a big red herring going on. This whole Doge thing about, and this is relevant to our voting too, this whole Doge thing about trying to find $884 billion to cut. They go to Congress asking for that. But the reality is these oligarchs don't want to pay taxes. I mean, if the oligarchs paid 75% on their wealth to the United States government, there would be not this huge deficit that the Republicans caused in the first place. But I don't hear this being pushed. We really got to push that on top of the election fraud that's going on. It's a red herring. They're saying, we're in heavy debt. How are we going to pay the debt down? Oh, don't give money to Ukraine. But the reality is, if Musk and Bezos and the Mercer family and the Princes and the DeVosses and all those other people paid their fair, and the Koch brother, or I should say is it David Koch?
Yeah.
One of them who's alive, paid their taxes, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place.
Right. And the money that they're taking from the government as so-called savings is all going right into their pocket anyway. Steve, Caruso, Nicole, and then Andrea, if you can stick with us, we're going to talk about DC home rule. Go ahead, but I want you to give us a closing on what you want to say. Steve Caruso, go ahead, please.
Yeah, tomorrow night's the State of the Union address. It was addressed on some TV shows today, how the Democrats should react. And I say they should all get up and say, we haven't counted the votes yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they haven't.
Right.
Thank you.
You're right. I mean, okay. And then, again, everybody, we really want to feature Greg Palast's Vigilantes Inc., which I wish had won the Academy Award last night for Best Documentary. I'm trying to unmute you, Nicole. We have 108 people with us. That's a magic number. There you are. Nicole, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to remind everybody that tomorrow there's a Trump will be talking, but we can all call the White House because he's very sensitive to the people calling. Because last time he had a video of people in chain, being put on plane to go to Guantanamo, and even a Republican, call the White House. So I'm going to put the number for the White House, and everybody can call and remind him that he was not given a mandate to turn America into a Western province of Russia. The way he treated President Zelensky is outrageous.
It was amazing. Also, thank you, Nicole. The public reaction was, especially in Europe, was very, very positive towards Zelensky, which was very relieving. And anybody who is interested should take a look at the Saturday Night Live sketch that was done Saturday night, the opening sketch on portraying the meeting. It was quite amazing. And again, everybody needs to remember a treaty was signed in 1994 guaranteeing Ukraine's sovereignty in exchange for their nuclear weapons, which they gave to Russia, for God's sakes.
Yes. Can I give
Anyway,
the White House comment line
Uh-huh.
number 202-456-1111. 202.
202-456-1111.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you so much. Andrea, I know you've got to go. Do you want to give us a wrap and tell us what people can do? That's the big ask. What can people do?
Well, there are two things. You can make phone calls to Wisconsin, which is going on right now. Your other option is that we will be launching Virginia soon. Now, Wisconsin is their actual general election on April 1st. In Virginia, our primary is June 17th, and then our general will not be until November. We normally like to really work on turning out the Black vote in the primary so that people really feel, oh, right, I'm aware there's an election. I voted in the primary. Now I'm going to go vote in the general. Right now, there are 4 Republicans running for governor, 1 Democrat, 1 independent. There are 3 Republicans running for lieutenant governor. There are 7 Democrats, and there is 1 Republican running for attorney general, and there are 2 Democrats that are running.
And how do people get a hold of you and plug in with you?
Well, I'll do anything. So, I mean, you can reach out to me if you want to. I'll do anything.
Or your organization.
All right. I dropped the links in the chat, and then I did drop in my email as well. And I am dropping in, if postcards are your thing, here are postcards. And then I gave you another link. I gave you a Mobilize link. Move On has an event called Calling BS on the Trump address. Do not watch that thing. Don't watch it live. Don't give him the viewership. I'm going to be watching the Move On. If you want to do something that will be far more educational, and they will tell you what you can do against. So rather than throwing things at your TV because you're watching Orange Man, go do something that is going to give you some things to do. Like I said, I am using elections as resistance. Imagine what the narrative is going to be at the end of November in 2025. When they lose, when we win everything in Virginia, let me talk in the affirmative. When we win the governor and lieutenant governor and attorney general and have 60 seats in the Virginia.
It's actually quite impressive.
Won't
Michael,
that make people excited?
Excellent, excellent. Mike Hersh, do we have Michael Brown with us? I don't see him.
We do.
Oh, good. Okay. Andrea, you are great. And it's great to have you with us. Come back soon and keep up your wonderful work. We're really impressed. And if you want to stay with us, Michael Brown, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
The senator from the District of Columbia. Michael?
Well, former senator from the District of Columbia. After 18 years, I didn't run for re-election this time, so I just retired in January.
Okay.
So you're a brand new guy who's a lawyer who was with Fair Vote, and he seems like a really good guy. His name is Ankit Jain, and but I was asked to be on the call tonight, so I'm here first of all because who can ever refuse an offer from Andrea Miller?
No, nobody.
And it's so nice to hear your voice again, Andrea. I don't know if you're still with us, but and also
Fatima and Nicole, if you'll let Michael start his talk. He's been waiting, and then we'll come back to you with your questions. Michael Brown, can you tell us what is the situation in the District of Columbia now with its 700,000 people in terms of home rule?
Well, we've got a real problem, and that is that, as you probably know, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says that Congress has the right to do whatever it wants in the District of Columbia. In fact, it's one of the most absolute powers of Congress. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has come out and said that they want to take control of the District of Columbia. And the senator from Utah, lovely man, has a Republican senator from Utah has introduced legislation along with a representative from the House from Tennessee to abolish home rule in the District of Columbia and get rid of the mayor and have Congress actually take over the District of Columbia, which they absolutely can do if they want. The bulwark against them taking over the district in the past has been the United States Senate. We put a crime bill, foolishly sent a crime bill up there last year, and we lost 55 Democrats. So it's iffy on how much we can count on the Senate. The majority of Democrats will stand with us, I'm sure, but I'm not sure we can get all the Democrats to stand with us.
Does it have to be a 60 vote? Is it a filibustered vote?
It has to be 60 if they want to get rid of the mayor, I believe, and they want to get rid of the city council. But there are many other ways they can take control of the district. They did it with the control board, you probably remember. So there are a lot of things they can do to take over without taking that final drastic step. But yes, I think it has to be 60 if they want to get rid of the mayor and the city council. But, we're orphans. That's our big problem. We're nobody's constituents. So we're really easy to sell out. And I don't know if you remember, but even when Obama was in office, there was an abortion issue. And he said publicly, I don't feel good about it, but I'll give you DC. And he sold us out on the issue to get his budget passed. So we're really vulnerable. But
and of course, Obama had the chance to engineer it so that DC could have become a state, which would have, we wouldn't be having this conversation if DC had been given the statehood that it should have had decades, years, 100, 200 years ago. Should have been.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But the opportunity that lies here is if we look back at the civil rights movement from the 1960s in the South, what really gave momentum to an activist movement that was over 100 years old was when America got behind it. We're really going to have to stand up to these guys in DC when they come after us, because it gives us the opportunity to show America not only what they're about, but about the injustice of us not having a voice in our own national legislature. Most Americans agree that we should have the same rights as they do. Over 70%, including Republicans, agree with that. So it gives us an opportunity to highlight our disenfranchised status. And that's really a problem that we have nationwide, because 70% of America also believes that we have the same rights that they do. They really don't know about this. This is kind of a dirty little secret that DC doesn't have the same rights. And we've, over the last, I would say, decade, America's become much more aware of it, but there's still, the majority of people don't know the situation.
Well, my sister, niece and nephew live in D.C., and my sister's really beside herself. How do you think the people of the District of Columbia, then we'll go to our hands here, how do you think the people of the District of Columbia will react when Trump comes after home rule?
Well, I think they'll be outraged. And it's what we've had in the past when Congress came after the crime bill, for example. There was a thing called Keep Your Hands Off DC, which lasted about 2 weeks, and 500 people got together and protested. And, I said at the time that 500 people didn't make a protest. They didn't make a movement. They made a club. But I think this might engender a movement here in the District of Columbia, because the majority of people in the District of Columbia want statehood, almost 80% of them. But they're preoccupied with other things. This will bring it to the forefront, I think. And I think if we're good about organizing, we'll see that the people of district will stand up.
Are you telling me that
put a lot of money into this? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Who put a lot of money into it?
We don't. We don't put any money or any effort really into it. We send people up to Congress to tell them what they already know, that we pay taxes and we fight in wars. We don't really put much money into the movement. And it's funny that last Congress, just about a year ago, they proposed legislation to totally abolish my office and to say that the District of Columbia could never use any money, public or private, for the advancement of statehood of the District of Columbia. Now, the only reason legislation failed is it was attached to a bill with an abortion rider on it, which Republicans found that the abortion rider was too liberal for some reason. I can't remember why, and they killed the bill. But otherwise, it looked like that was going to go through. And if that goes through, the District of Columbia, everything that will be done in terms of activism will have to be done without the District of Columbia. I mean, the government won't be able to put any money into it, either public money or private money.
Wow, it's astounding.
Right. So, well, we'd have to handle everything ourselves, whatever we do.
Unbelievable. Fatima, I'll call you in a minute, but Mike Hersh is the co-convenor who invited Michael Brown on, and who Mike does live in the vicinity of D.C. and is a board member of the radio station in D.C. Mike, you want to talk to Mike Brown here?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And once a senator, always a senator in my book. Thank you very much for explaining the situation. And I'd like to call out what this is as what it is. It's racism. It's because the district is a majority minority jurisdiction, and the generally white and too often white supremacist right-wing Trump movement has their long knives out for DC. And it reminds me of the disenfranchisement of the predominantly Black jurisdictions in Michigan under their right-wing Republican governor. Now, this is a nonpartisan Zoom, but we're free to report that white supremacists are going to do white supremacist things. And I'd just like your comment on what you think if there's an opportunity in the anti-DC assault on the federal workforce by Trump and Musk and the maniacs working with them, if this is going to create an opportunity by sympathy with federal workers, and then also highlighting the need that we have for a functioning federal government.
Well, I would hope that would happen. Unfortunately, most federal workers don't live in the District of Columbia, but I would hope that this, again, as I said earlier, the publicity from this would do exactly that. But I should say, although you're right, the recent history of our disenfranchisement has been surrounded by racism. Racism has been at the core of it. But we also need to remember that the District of Columbia was majority white for the first 100 years when we were denied. So it's racism, but it's also some other thing. And now, in addition to being racist, it's also that we're Democrat. Let's not forget, we have not elected a Democrat in the District of Columbia since Carol Schwartz, if you can remember Carol. And we have no elected Republicans in District of Columbia. We've never never voted for a Republican president. I worked for Jimmy Carter. I think we won Georgia, where Mondale was from, Minnesota, and DC. That was it. But so it's more complex than that. And right now, we make a great whipping boy for the Republicans. Don't forget that we have this crime crisis that they created, right? Well, they're going to hold DC up as an example, and it won't matter whether crime has gone up or gone down. We all know that, right? I'm not even sure they can tell the truth from lies. But what's going to happen is that they're going to use this to slam the Democrats. So I hope, I'd like to say, Mike, that people understand thoroughly what you just said. But the NAACP, several civil rights groups in America, their name is on our letterhead, but they don't actively work towards DC statehood for several reasons. One, that we don't do enough ourselves, and two, they have bigger fish to fry in a lot of places in the country. So we need to get that message across. We really do. I mean, you disenfranchised, we fought like hell when there were 1,000 Black people disenfranchised in Georgia, but here you have literally hundreds of thousands of Black people being disenfranchised, and we do very little about it nationally. So that message needs to get out there, and that's one of the things we need to get America to stand behind.
Well, you also have one of the things that really, you talk about a red flag that infuriates a bull. You have a chief executive in D.C. who is a woman of color, and there's nothing that inflames the MAGA crowd more than a woman of color in power. I do want to very quickly say hi to Ray MCCLENDON in Atlanta. Ray, do you have anything new to report from Georgia? And then we'll go to Fatima and Nicole. Hold on, I'm trying to unmute you here, Ray.
Ray's a co-host. He can unmute.
There you go. You're good. You're good.
Hey, everybody. Now, nice to be with you today, and we're in the process of organizing some new frontline activities here as we continue to work on a new strategy for 2025 and 26. Certainly like what Andrea has been doing, and we'll be in partnership as we always have been with her. We're getting ready for the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday coming up this week, and we'll have people going down to Selma for that commemoration of that event, and it's so timely in the times we're living in right now. So that's one of the first things on our list, is to re-engage people through direct action. We're having an activity at the state capitol tomorrow where we will be addressing a number of these issues right outside the Capitol, and hope to have a very strong turnout for that. So we're spending a lot of time now on getting down in the trenches, galvanizing our local organizations so we can prepare for municipal elections in November here in Georgia, that hopefully will lead to reversing this turmoil we are in at the ballot box going into the midterms.
Well, has anything happened to counteract what we saw in Greg Palast's movie Vigilantes Inc. with this ability of MAGA people to challenge registered voters?
No, that is absolutely still going on. That's going to continue to be a problem. Unfortunately, again, they control both houses of the legislature and the governorship, so they are able to maintain control of the state election board, and our only redress is going to be in the courts, and by educating and informing our people to get out to the local election boards themselves, to hold the local election boards accountable to ensure that our people have access to vote. So this year we're going to continue to ramp up our local grassroots activities with local election boards as well as on the state.
Well, that's the key now. I mean, everybody's thinking, oh, well, we'll get this taken care of in the midterm elections. But if people can't vote, well, what's going to happen? It's going to be more of the same, right?
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Well, okay, Ray, keep reporting to us, please. And
yeah, we'll do.
If there's any progress on reversing the disenfranchisement that has caused this catastrophe here. Fatima, thank you for your patience. And then Nicole, go ahead, Fatima Argun.
Yeah, no worries. Just a couple of things. First of all, I don't know, I've been away from this group for a while and just coming
Okay.
back today because I finally had a slice of time, but
Okay.
I live in DC, more specifically in Arlington, in Virginia, in Arlington, right across the river. And it's great to see Andrea. I also wanted to thank Mike Brown for his very informative overview of DC. I learned, I've lived here for the good part of 3 decades, and I still learned something. So I thought that was pretty
Okay.
awesome. Thank you.
Well, you need to hook up with the organizations and support them there. That would be great. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of comments. In terms of staying connected, I'm throwing out I'm in a leadership position with Arlington Democrats. So please feel free to reach out to me as a resource. I'm chair of Inclusion and Equity, and I'm also chair of the Interfaith Advocacy Outreach and Advocacy Caucus. So
put your contacts in the chat, please.
Okay, I will. But that's one of the reasons I was raising my hand, Harvey, because hold on, let me put my camera on. It's one of the reasons that I was had my hand up is because I'm not able to comment in the chat. It's telling me that the chat is disabled.
Well,
we've been Zoom bombed, so please don't complain about it. We're trying to keep this a safe space for everybody. And we're doing the best we can.
I put Fatima's contact information or website in the chat already just now.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would also I have noticed that several people have commented in the chat. So obviously not everyone is disabled.
The co-host can chat. Please move on.
Yeah, we've limited the chat to the co-host because of the Zoom bombing. But Myla has put your contacts in the chat.
Can I just say that Fatima is a board member of Women for Peace Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, and we're really happy to have you here with us.
Yes, thank you.
Do you pronounce your name?
I don't know who said that, but I appreciate the.
I'm MYLA, and it's because we were Zoom bombed. Only the co-host can put information in the chat.
I totally understand that. I've been on many calls that I have facilitated, and we've been Zoom bombed too, and I understand the reason for that. But if you would please allow me to comment, that would be great. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to, in terms of cutting the budget, I just also wanted to comment that. If we slice the Pentagon budget in half, I think that would make a huge difference in the deficit too, especially, several years in a row. Finally, I wanted to comment on the fact, I don't know if anyone has been following this, but No Other Land won the Oscar for Best Documentary. And I was quite encouraged to see that. As a peacemaker, I think that was a big victory for world peace. So I didn't know if anyone was going to be commenting on that in this chat or in this conversation or not.
Maybe later on, and certainly next week we can deal with it. We do have Camilla Rees with us. Camilla, do you have your guests? We have 112 people. Thank you, Fatima. Is it Fatima? Fatima?
It's Fatima.
Fatima. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say before we move on?
No, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience and waiting. And we'll try and balance our precautions with the use of the chat. Okay, we appreciate that.
Sluggo, I just wanted to say we've been under constant attack during this Zoom, and it's only through the vigilance of the co-hosts that we were able to keep from getting deluged with pornography and whatnot. So I'm a little sensitive to people who are demanding that we loosen our security. We cannot.
I don't think he was demanding, really, Mike.
No, I don't.
Okay, we're good.
Marla, just let me finish. And Fatima, I've been on Zooms with you before. It's great to see you again. And thank you for all your wonderful leadership. You're amazing. And thank you for being with us.
Yes, and thank you, Steve and Mike, for protecting us. This is an ugly situation here, and they really suffered at PDA. And so far, we've had a clean call. It's fantastic. Really, really appreciate that. Ray McClendon, it was great to have you with us. We now have, we're going to do a half hour or so on EMF and some very concrete political agenda on dealing with cell towers in communities. This dates back to the Telecommunications Act of Clinton Gore, when the outrageous imposition was made on the country to put cell towers up throughout the country without local communities having the ability to challenge them on health issues. And CAMILLA, who follows the EMF issue, very, very real leader in that, has some scientific findings to present, and we're going to try and really help inaugurate a campaign to change this law where a local community cannot object to a cell tower based on health concerns. And then at the half hour, we're going to talk further about connecting the upcoming rallies. And we know that there'll be millions of people in the street this summer. Most of them will have cell phones. And there's a discussion we want to have as to how people can collectively communicate from these mass marches, so that they're no longer like photo ops. A million people turn up, they have a good time, they go home. We want to take it to another level in this era of electronic communication. So first, let's talk. Someone else have a hand up. I'm missing this. I'm sorry. Oh, Marion, Camilla, are you ready to go? Camilla Rees, do we have you unmuted? If you'll raise your hand, that will help us. Marion, Melissa, Ronald, Lynn, and then we're going to go, and Nicole, and then we're going to go to Camilla and have this report on EMF, which is really important. And then we'll go in the second half hour of this hour, we'll go to Lee Felsenstein and Mike and Steve and get into a deeper discussion on the electronics of mass rallies. Marion, go ahead. Melissa, very quickly, please.
Oh, okay, really quick. Same thing as Fatima. I couldn't ask in the chat. We still don't have any information up there about even the name of the candidate in Wisconsin, which I would like to have. Maybe the co-host can put it in the chat. That's all. Done.
Okay, Miriam, we'll follow up with that one way or the other. Thank you so much. Melissa, Ronald, Lynn, Nicole, and then we're going to go Camilla.
Yes, thank you. What do you guys expect from the progressive ring from a precinct committee person? What are your expectations? Because I'm thinking about doing that in my district, and I'm in college.
Yeah, Melissa, this is a different Zoom. We're not really a partisan Zoom here, but that's appropriate for the PDA victory Zoom on Thursday.
Okay. And then I also had another question.
Sure, go ahead.
What other things can we do to help with the EMF stuff in a local way?
Well, listen, once you listen in, we're going to go that right now with Camilla Rees, okay? So go ahead. Thank you for that. Ronald, I'm trying to mute you, Lynn, and then we're Nicole, and then we're going to go to Camilla, who seems to be. Ronald, real quick, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I guess I have two comments, and they may be off topic. This is my first time in the meeting, so so I don't know if it's appropriate.
Go ahead.
Okay. The most significant item that's occurring today and this weekend is the Doge group accessing Social Security and firing and turning things off. This is like beyond the pale. I'm 70 years old. I've worked for 50 years. Okay. What I think, and this is just my suggestion, because I'm from Washington State, we have progressive leaders in our state.
Yeah, you got to get to the point, Ronald.
Okay, the point is, I think we need to be calling not our representatives only, but we need to be calling the opposition party and telling them how upset we are, because they need to hear the noise and they need to understand that the numbers that are involved here are beyond anything that I don't think they personally are getting.
Okay.
Gotcha. Next point.
Got that. Thank you, Ronald. And stay with us, please. I want to, Lynn and Nicole, if you can be really brief. Camilla has been very polite and waiting, and she's got a great presentation to make. So go ahead, Lynn, Nicole, and then we can go to Camilla Rees.
Yeah, I just want to bump two things. Thank you, Ronald Sontag. It's very, very important. Very big trouble. That's our money. We earned it for Social Security. That's number one. Number two, the fact that no other land won the Academy Award, as Fatima tried to suggest, is huge. That there were 1 billion people listening to the Oscars and watching the Oscars, and they all got that. It just rode over Israel's Hasbara and the crap happening from the Trump administration. So let's celebrate that.
Thank you.
Good one. Thank you, Lynn.
Nicole, go ahead. And then
yes. The number of the White House that I mentioned earlier, somebody posted something and I think it's the wrong number.
Okay,
it's
what's the number?
202-456-1111.
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
We'll get it properly posted. Okay, thank you so much, Nicole. Everybody, a fantastic group. We still have 107 people with us, proving once again we have a great attention span. I don't know if you're all Americans, but here we are. Camilla Rees, you appear to be at the beach. You're one of the leading organizers and activists on the issue of electronic magnetic frequency, and we have an opportunity, we hope, to reverse this horrible decision from the Telecommunications Act under Clinton Gore. Can you talk about that, please, and tell us about your new scientific findings?
Sure, Harvey. Great to be here. I'm very grateful that you have a commitment to this issue. You've had the topic on many times over the years. And I think that by now, as you and I discussed, most people are aware, at least on those on the call, are aware that there are serious biological and health effects from electromagnetic fields. And many of us have taken steps to minimize our exposures using hardwired connections and not using a cell phone against the head and using shielding where appropriate. So we're not going to be talking about that today. But we're focused on the big question, which is, even though we've learned how to minimize our exposures, we still got the issue of when are we going to see real change on a societal level to address these risks. And right now we're seeing nonstop proliferation of cell towers and antennas, every highway, everywhere you look. They're hidden ones as well. They're coming closer and closer to homes. And we're also seeing dozens of bills in Congress seeking to further enable more wireless technologies. And yet, despite all that being said, we're also at a very interesting point in time where there's real interest in understanding the roots of illness. Right now, we spend $3.7 trillion on healthcare. It represents almost 20% of our GDP. 86% of that 3.7 trillion is from chronic illnesses. And I could go on and on with statistics, but the point is that there's a real interest in looking at the roots of illness instead of focusing on doctoring and the back end billions put into electronic medical records to help organize everybody's information. We've got to focus on the front end. What are the roots of illness? And now we finally are seeing a very strong interest in that. So Richard Lear, who's with us today, and I published a paper recently called Wireless Technologies, the Safety of Wireless Technologies, the Scientific View, and we'll put a link to it in the chat. And in this paper, it reviews several review papers, including one from the U.S. Navy in 1971 that shows that 23 of the 36 fastest growing diseases today were predicted in 1971 by that Navy study. And Richard's going to talk about the connection with what evidence do we have for the connection between electromagnetic fields and all this wireless and chronic illnesses, the issue du jour. Then we're going to hear from Scott McCullough, who is the Chief Litigation Counsel for Children's Health Defense, for their EMR and wireless project that's led by Miriam Eckenfels, who I think will be on the call as well. And Scott is going to talk about what Harvey just mentioned, this Section 704 of the Telecom Act of 96 that took away state and local governments' rights to limit the siting of towers and antennas on health and environmental grounds. And it also has resulted in courts deciding that people who have been injured are not, there's no recourse. There's no available, remedy if you have been hurt biologically, environmentally, aesthetically, and in terms of real estate devaluation, in terms of relocation costs, whatever. And then finally, the state police powers over health and safety, which would normally exist, local powers, are considered conflict preempted. So there's a new campaign led by Children's Health Defense in collaboration with many other groups, and the groups are growing, and we'd love you to join us. It's called 704 No More, and Scott is going to talk about that. So
Okay.
We're going to first start with Richard. Richard Lear, are you with us? Oh, there you are. Okay, good.
And so let me challenge this, please. The upshot of your new research is that there seems to be hard evidence that EMF in the background of our ecosystems contributes to chronic illness.
Well, that's what Richard's going to talk about. Yes.
Okay. Is that a fair assessment?
In a major way, in a very significant way.
That's a huge assertion.
And now there is a mechanism of action that it's been known for a long time that there are all kinds of a range of biological effects, but there's never been a clear understanding of a unifying mechanism that could explain all these different illnesses that have been linked to it. And Richard's going to talk about the evidence for such a unifying molecule, actually, that's created by electromagnetic fields. Very exciting. So let's let Richard. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about the paper and the evidence that there is a connection between EMFs and chronic illness?
Sure, and there's really two papers, but the last paper the most recent paper we published just about a month ago, it really cites the original paper on wireless that was built and ordered by the U.S. Navy. The Navy was really concerned about all the radar that was going on and all their naval sailors and people in the field getting sick. And there's all sorts of evidence that a lot of the wireless signals, both the communication signals and radar, were causing a problem. Wow. And they asked Zori Glazer, Dr. Zori Glazer was a lieutenant then in Bethesda, Maryland, to go and figure out how many, go out and find studies that show at low intensity levels, like legal levels of today, how many would be out there and what do they show? And he found 2,311 studies in 1971. And it covered 132 bioeffects, including 23 of the fastest growing diseases today. The chronic disease situation today is not well known, but now that Robert Kennedy's in office, it may be because he is committed to that. But I published a paper in 2016 that chronicled the chronic disease problem at that time. And what we found was 36 fast-growing diseases, more than doubled between 1990 and 2015. We found that 400 million instances of these diseases had risen just during that time frame in America. The average American had 2.3 of these diseases or chronic conditions. And they're the usual suspects, everything from depression, anxiety, ADHD, Alzheimer's, hypothyroidism, on and on and on, even erectile dysfunction. So when we did that paper then, we found a core 7-factor biological footprint or fingerprint. And we published that paper, released it. It was a $2.6 trillion problem at the time. It's not much more than that. And the diseases were all chronic and germless. There was no germs here. This was a germless disease. That paper was the first paper that I know of that actually chronicled the chronic disease problem. In the meantime, all these diseases had also been predicted in the research I'd done, 15 years of research on EMFs, electromagnetic fields, wireless. And Zori Glazer's paper was the magnificent one commissioned by the U.S. government, the U.S. Navy, and it actually showed what can go wrong. And it covered, dozens and dozens of disease states: central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, genetic and chromosome damages, psychological disorders, big categories, metabolic, all these things, changes in physiological function, blood disorders, gastrointestinal, endocrine, and 132 bioeffects is not small. So when you put these two together, you have a pattern. The pattern is The Navy said that electromagnetic fields and wireless, particularly, and the kind of wireless that we use, cell phones, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all these things we use, they're in our car, they're in our house. We got 15 signals or 20 signals in our house. These are not heavy signals. These are not cell towers. These are in our environment. And it doesn't take very much power to actually start to cause the onset of chronic disease. And I can get into details, but I'll stop there.
Well, it's really, I have a particular interest in this because in finding nuclear power for the last 50 years, the debate on low-level radiation and both gamma and X-ray and also alpha and beta particles. This has been, a very key debate. As you probably know, in the 1970s, Dr. John Goffman, who was the head of the health research at the Atomic Energy Commission, warned that nuclear power plants were killing 32,000 people a year just from low-level radiation. And now you've come forward with this. Dr. Goffman was not treated well, by the way. He's basically thrown out of the AEC.
So,
and now you have
Richard,
the EMF. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Camilla.
Can we just keep going?
Yes.
Richard, can you tell us how many instances of diseases found in the Navy study happened to people from 1990 to 2015? 1990, when the exposure started, began. Before that, there was very little EMF exposure, and they were rare. So since 1990, when you did the digging and researched, how many instances of diseases, and what do you estimate the cost of those diseases to be that were predicted by the Navy study?
So when I finished the paper, there was about 700 million instances of these diseases in the U.S. population, at least. I got all this information from the U.S. government, actually, that they didn't do this study, by the way. CDC, I found from FDA, I looked at NCBI. And so during that time, I looked at so what did Zori say? What did Dr. Glaser say? What did the Navy say? The Navy said, 23 concurrent diseases with what we found, and 580 million instances. So had we listened to the Navy back in 1971 and realized we better be careful with what we do with wireless technologies in our society. Remember, there were no cell phones then. There was radio stations, there was radar, and there was some satellites going on, but there wasn't a lot in the public domain. But if the U.S. government actually knew that there was a problem, they just didn't either communicate it internally or tell us. But if they told us, we may have been able to save, half billion, 500 million potential cases, which is
so what
amazing.
What kind of new diseases occurred, Richard, after 1990? New categories of disease?
Well, the big categories of diseases, before that, was all about heart disease and cancer, right? We lived with that for from 70 to 2000. But then suddenly all these things, autoimmune system diseases, autoinflammatory, then metabolic. And metabolic is like obesity is a metabolic disease. We blame people for eating too much, but it's a disease and it affects your mitochondria. And it is not to be blamed on people, although the diet is part of it, but it is actually a chronic disease. And these are all linked together. So metabolic disease, neurological conditions, neurological went off the map. I've got a number here somewhere. Just in 2015, neurological, 91 million instances of neurological disease in the US, 200 plus million autoinflammatory, 101 million sleep insufficiency, and 110 million obesity. Now, that wasn't going on in 1970. Something changed.
So the average American had how many chronic diseases before this and after this?
So the average American had less than one chronic disease
prior to 1990.
Back in the 80s, and probably in the 70s, like a half a disease. Now we're at 2.3, or by 2016, we were at 2.3.
Do you believe there's a clear link to this to EMF?
Well, we can see that all these diseases increased and that were predicted in 1971. Let's get into let me ask you a devil's advocate question, Richard. There were other factors impacting people's health starting in 1990 as well, like sugar consumption, agrochemicals, food additives, pesticides. How can one say that the breadth and depth of the science showing risks from wireless radiation is overwhelming and that there is an undeniable connection between EMFs and chronic diseases when there were these other factors at play?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say that these other factors actually are part of this problem. The wireless connection is even better, though. The mechanism is very clear. There's a molecule that gets generated in the body by electrical fields. I'll keep it simple. When your body senses an electrical field, it releases some messengers to the cells, and the cells release a free radical. I don't know if you know free radical. It's an oxidative stress, but this one is superoxide. Superoxide is super dangerous because it forms something else called peroxynitrite. Now, I don't want to get too much science here, but peroxynitrite has been studied in 14,000 studies. And the National Institutes of Health, our government, in 2007, did the landmark paper on peroxynitrite and connected it with 56 chronic diseases and over 100 biological disruptions. Now, these disruptions are all over the place. You can't make serotonin. You can't make dopamine. Your fatty acid, your fats are destroyed. Your proteins are destroyed internally. Your blood-brain barrier is penetrated. All of this from peroxynitrite. Well, how did we get peroxynitrite? Where did that come from? So this is the thing. In the first paper, we just said we saw peroxynitrite and 6 other factors. There's a 7-factor problem. Where did it come from? So we looked at the exogenous, the things outside the body, not the endogenous, but the exogenous factors. And the exogenous factors were many. Sugar, but sugar is kind of over by 1990. It had already grown 1,100%, and it hasn't grown since then. Glyphosate, which is Roundup that has been put in our entire food supply, and that creates a problem. So those two are in there. They're definitely part of the problem. But peroxynitrite gets formed by superoxide. Your body makes superoxide when it thinks it's being attacked by a virus, by a mold, by a bacteria. It's the natural immune system. We're creating superoxide. Well, that's a good thing, because when you have like COVID's coming your way or any of these other bacterias, superoxide goes out. It's like a grenade. It blows these viruses up. It's a factor of protection. But when the body sees an electromagnetic field, it also creates superoxide, and there's nothing there. And all this extra superoxide starts flying around the body, and before you know it, it combines with nitric oxide, and it creates It creates peroxynitrite.
This is really fascinating. I will say, and Camilla, I want to move to Scott McCullough, that the Navy also played a role in. They were concerned that the low intelligence of people coming in to recruits for the Navy, and those on the fringe were equating it with fallout from bomb tests. And the U.S. Navy actually correlated fallout from bomb tests to lowered SAT scores in the United States. And that's from the U.S. Navy. Yeah. So go ahead, Scott.
So let me ask one other question before we turn to Scott, which is that in the paper, Richard, it's clear the biological effects are happening at levels way less than our current exposure guidelines. And in the paper, we mentioned that the FCC and FDA actually aren't deciding what these exposure guidelines should be, but that they have been outsourced. The responsibility is outsourced to 2 NGOs, the IEEE and the ANSI, tech organizations with absolutely no biological or medical expertise. Right. So can you confirm that, and why would that be the case? Why would that have happened? Why would they allowed that?
So for a long time, nobody really knows how low-level electromagnetic fields work. So they kept on focusing on the heating effect, like the microwave oven. You put your head in the oven and you're going to get sick. But the U.S. government decided that was the only effect. And these studies, there's 6,000 of them that show biological effects at low levels. Like what we're sitting in today, the Wi-Fi around you, everything. It's affecting your superoxide, your peroxynitrite. You're getting into disease state. All these things are happening. And people get diseases for different reasons, but we are swimming in a world of electronic fields, and our bodies cannot get rid of this fast enough. So what's happening is when you think about, I think that where Camilla's going with this is, like why do the agencies not act on this? Why do they pass the baton to someone else? It's a very complicated subject, but we now have the answers. And I did something before the show that just surprised the heck out of me. You guys all use ChatGPT, I'm sure, at some point, right? Well, ChatGPT, of course, is AI. It's a Microsoft tool, OpenAI. And I went and said, how many diseases are caused by peroxynitrite? And it gave me this long, incredible answer, and I could not believe it. But it actually associated 18 of the diseases that we did with electromagnetic fields and put EMF exposures, Wi-Fi, 5G, and electronics as the number 2 cause of chronic disease. And now ChatGPT is saying it. So Camilla and I really didn't have to do a paper because it's already out there. I don't know how it figured it out, but it is
probably
amazing.
Figured it out by looking at your paper.
Exactly. What advice, Richard, do you have for the new administration related to their desire?
What can we do in particular to force this as activists?
There's things people can do once we get the word out. There's things people can do on a personal level. The best thing each of us can do is turn off all our electronics while we sleep. You get a third of your life without electronics. Turn off the Wi-Fi, unplug your phone, move everything away from your bed, and you will see within 2 weeks a much healthier life. Less headaches, less sleep issues, less erectile dysfunction, all these things that are bothering us, headaches and that kind of thing. So that's number one. The number 2 thing is, if I was to advise the new administration on what to do, or at least suggest what to do, I'd say, first, you need to bring together the people that know a lot about peroxynitrite. And Dr. Paul Patcher and the people at NIH who wrote that paper should get the Nobel Prize because they actually found the smoking gun for chronic disease in 2007. And why are we not acting on it 17 years later? I asked Paul Patcher that in an interview, and he couldn't answer it. He finished his paper and started doing papers on cannabis. I said, no, you've just solved the chronic disease problem. Please continue. And he said, well, I'm off to something else. Okay. The second is confirm P factor. P factor is peroxynitrite and the 6 factors around it. We can confirm that. We know why we're getting sick. It's a fingerprint that covers Alzheimer's, autism, erectile dysfunction, hyperthyroid. All these things share the same 7 factors. Really? We should do something. If we know what that is, we need to do something about it. And third, we need to have these human studies, and it can go beyond wireless. We need human studies, epidemiology. We haven't spelled epidemiology since like 1994. Human studies will show, and you can do it very easily, the introduction of 5G, for instance, into a community. It can be tested. The introduction of glyphosate into a food system where it wasn't before. Organic versus non-organic. All these things be chemicals, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, wireless. They're all part of this bigger problem. Wireless is the crown jewel. Wireless is causing $2 trillion, maybe $2.5 trillion health crisis in the US today. And I'm not saying we should stop wireless, but we need to be aware of what's happening so that we can modify it. So that's my pitch to the world.
Okay, but we've got to stop the rollout of these towers and antennas, and we've got to change Section 704 of the Telecom Act to restore local government's rights on this issue. So that, let's turn to Scott McCullough. Welcome, Scott. Scott has a 40-year history of litigation on telecom, internet, utility, and free speech issues, and he's leading the litigation for the 704 No More legal, legislative, and advocacy initiative of children's health defense. So, Scott, from a legal perspective, can you tell us what's enabling the ongoing rollout of the cell towers and antennas? What is going on?
Well, first, tell us very quickly, 704 No More, what does that mean?
That means Section 704 of the Telecom Act of 1996 that Bill Clinton signed took away local government's rights to influence the siting of cell towers or antennas on health or environmental grounds. So it completely stripped the local governments of the ability to protect their citizens, and also courts have since, not allowed any recourse to people who have been injured, took away state police powers over health and safety related to this issue that's considered conflict preempted. So this has got to go, and that's why the initiative is called 704 No More. The federal preemption in 704 has got to go.
Okay.
And let's hear from Scott.
Yeah, go ahead. We got 10 more minutes on this. This is really phenomenal, Camilla. Thank you so much. And Richard, go ahead, Scott.
Hi, thank you. I presume everybody can hear me.
Yes.
I'm Scott McCullough. I'm Chief Litigating Counsel, outside counsel for Children's Health Defense and the EMR and wireless team. We've been involved in the wireless area for almost 5 years now. We were one of the plaintiffs in the case where the DC Circuit Court of Appeals told the Federal Communications Commission that it needed to look at its wireless exposure guideline. Since then, we've expanded our work. We work at the local level. We help communities, folks in communities when a cell tower comes to town. It's really hard work. Most people don't even know how a zoning process works. We bring in experts. We help them do that. We work at a state level, trying to convince state environmental agencies to look at this issue. And then, of course, at the federal level, we're trying to get the federal government to finally recognize the problem that Richard and Camilla have already explained. I'm not going to get into the science. I might say something wrong. So I'll leave the health science to Richard and Camilla. But I can tell you, we do have the evidence. Indeed, the DC Circuit found 3.5 years ago that we had put on a convincing case showing that the current exposure guidelines were not adequately protective of health or the environment because they are based only on this notion of thermal heating and do not recognize that there is indeed a biological response to the radiation to which everyone is being exposed.
Wow.
So
Why?
the court said to the FCC to come back and justify the guidelines. And where are we on that issue?
Well, the FCC is refusing to do what the court told it to do.
Oh.
We've been asking the FCC regular intervals, please do what the court told you to do. Here's the court mandate. See this? It said, fix this. And it's just simply refusing. And that's because the FCC, like many other federal agencies, is controlled by the industry that it regulates. It's not interested in looking at this because it will hurt the industry masters that it's supposed to regulate. It's not a health agency in any event. They're engineers. They're not doctors.
So what's the next
physicists.
step on that, Scott? Before we turn to talk about Section 704 with regard to the exposure guidelines, what is the next step with the DC Circuit Court? And then we can go on to 704.
Well, we are intending, we have to give the FCC a reasonable time to respond to the court's mandate. There's kind of a rule of thumb in the DC Circuit, something like 4 years after they issue a mandate, they will then maybe entertain a request by the party to enforce that mandate. And we're coming up on that now. We're looking at going back to asking the court to tell the FCC that they really meant it. They really meant what they said. But at the same time, we do have many other things happening at the federal level, including this initiative to look at over in the health agencies, the agencies that's, no health, to look at what is contributing to this epidemic of chronic condition. And we have a recognition now that EMR is one of these causative agents. In the recent MAHA Commission executive order by the president, asking them to look at chronic conditions and give a report, EMR is listed in there as a subject they are to address.
That would be electronic magnetic radiation?
Yes. Also, many people call it radio frequency radiation.
Wow.
Yep, it's so exciting. So it's going to be examined. And how many days do they have to come up with this report, Scott?
About 90 days for the first one, and then about 170 for the second one for the full report.
And
so
will the process be affected by these layoffs at the federal government?
Well, if we actually do get a confirmation by a federal health agency, as we expect, that there is a biological response and it is harmful, that indeed people are getting hurt, that the environment is getting hurt. It's not just people, it's the birds, it's the bees, it's the trees, it's the microbiomes in the ground, our pollinators, everything that's living is affected because it is these essential life functions that Richard already explained that are being impacted. And that's not just human. Now, children in particular are hurt worse. But if we get a federal recognition by a federal health agency, I think it really does have the potential to break the dam.
And I assume, well, where is the new health commissioner, Robert Kennedy, on this issue? And by the way, I don't see Lee Felsenstein. If you're on, Lee, we are going to segue at some point to the discussion that we talked about earlier. But go ahead with linking up the
Secretary Kennedy has recognized this problem. He was asked about it in his confirmation hearing, and he indicated that he had seen substantial evidence that there is a problem and that he would look at it. And so we will see a report on this subject as part of the Maha Commission report, and presumably further action by HHS and its constituent agents. We don't know what that will be, but they are beginning to acknowledge the problem that has been denied for so long by the federal government.
Wow. Camilla, did you want to jump in on that?
Sure. Well, I actually wanted to just backtrack a little bit and say, Scott, how could this language in Section 704 have been put in the Telecom Act in the first place? Did members of Congress know about this? Did everybody know what the consequences were going to be? How did that happen?
Well, I actually happened to be around when the 96 Act was passed. I was representing different clients, and it wasn't about health or the environment, but I was there. I was kind of in the room as all of this was being done. And it was passed, and this new language showed up in the late at night as part of a conference committee report. It just showed up overnight. And it's clear that the telecom industry and the wireless industry basically bought this. And, money changed hands, and it was done. Now, do the senators and the representatives who were there at the time, did they know of this health and environmental issue? Probably not. They did not know what the science was really beginning to say even then. They were told that there was no problem.
Right.
They were told that the only problem is from the so-called thermal effects, that there is not a biological response. So they were lied to. And as a consequence, they passed this preemptive language. We're now way down the road. We're way down the road now.
I ran into this personally, Scott. I ran into this personally. And by the way, I want to welcome Julie Levine, who's also a major activist on this issue. I tried to stop a cell tower from going on the school in my small town in Ohio, and I got nowhere. I mean, I couldn't do anything. So what do you want people to do now?
Well, first of all, what we are beginning, we're launching a new lawsuit. We are going to directly challenge this preemption. We are going to say, yes, Congress passed this statute, but it is unconstitutional. It cannot be sustained. All of the court cases that have gone before have read this preemptive language, but they haven't ever really considered whether Congress had the power to do this to begin with. And we want to put this issue front and center. We want to get a federal court to decide whether the traditional state remedies for local zoning, always been a traditional state thing, communities can protect their citizens, whether people's property rights, all this energy comes over property line. We don't ever consent to that. It's like a trespass. The people who are injured, there have been people who had brain cancer from this. There are children who got many kinds of cancer because of a tower right next to them, beaming this stuff into their bedrooms or their bathroom. And they have been told by the courts that they have no remedy because of the language in the Communications Act. And we want to force a federal court to decide whether it is constitutional to do that. It deprives people of their individual liberties. It deprives their property rights. It denies due process. And we think it also violates the Commerce Clause, because many of the people who are injured have already done everything they could to avoid this. Once you know that you are sensitive and you are being made sick by it, you can get rid of this wireless stuff. You can no longer have a cell phone. You can make sure you don't have a wireless router anymore. You can clear out your house, go wired like you're supposed to go wired. You can go live out in the country, but this stuff follows you. Soon there's a tower right down the street from you or right next door, and you've got no choice. You are being involuntarily exposed. You have no right of informed consent, And so we think that is a violation of individual liberties. There are due process, both substantive and procedural. There's a Commerce Clause issue. There's a Ninth Amendment issue. There's a right to jury trial. All of this is being denied, and we want to challenge.
Scott, you've also mentioned there are a lot of fake trees out there hiding cell towers, and you mentioned that up in Lake Tahoe there's a microplastics issue. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah, as I said, this affects not just people and children. It especially affects, but it also affects the environment in many ways. Everybody knows how ugly these things are. They're really ugly. The big ones are ugly. Even the short ones are ugly. They're just big towers all over the place. They're not pleasant to look at. So one of the things that the industry does is it tries to hide them. It'll put it inside a fake tree. Well, these trees are made out of plastic. And what we are seeing now, and it's been proven in Lake Tahoe, for example, that the plastic parts of the fake pine trees there, they fall to the ground, they break down, and now they're finding a bunch of microplastics from these fake trees and the leaves in the Lake Tahoe water. So we've already got a microplastics problem. This is contributing to that as well.
Unbelievable.
Scott, can you quickly just paint a picture of really what's happening to people like in schools near towers, or the Pittsfield situation, the guy from Utah who had to move to Idaho and then the tower followed him, the lady that had the 51 strokes, paint a picture of really the suffering that's happening, that people are, that's being ignored.
Well, this is
Lee Felsenstein, I'm calling you. I don't see you on the call to go to the next discussion. We'll continue this for a couple more minutes. We are going to get to the other issue of connecting self rallies, but go ahead, Scott, and then Julie Levine will chime in.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. We've got a bunch of cases where we're trying to push through this issue, but we've realized we really have to directly challenge the main problem. But there have been instances where children have gotten sick from a cell tower that's right next door. There was a cluster of lymphatic, liver, brain, and kidney cancer near Rapone, California. We've got a case in Pittsfield where a tower went up and the whole neighborhood got sick. Everybody got sick, including the children. They were basically driven out of their home. Our clients had to move to a little rat-infested cabin, mold all over the place, no heat, no water, because they were just driven out of their home. We have a client in Minnesota, cell tower turns on. She immediately begins to get strokes. She's now had 51 strokes. It's a miracle she's still alive. Okay. The only reason she's alive right now is she lives in a tent, a shielded tent in the garage in Minnesota in the winter.
Okay.
Got a client in Idaho, same situation.
The question
Can I kind of wrap it up and just say that
yes.
we need everybody's help for this campaign, the 704 No More campaign. If you have a group of constituents that would like to sign on to endorse it, that would be wonderful. If you can open the door to potential funders, we need to raise $1.5 million. That would be wonderful. If you happen to know expert witnesses or potentially plaintiffs on whose behalf the litigation will be filed. If you have celebrity contacts that you think could potentially get interested to help raise visibility. And soon there's going to be 704 No More merchandise in the Children's Health Defense store that we'd love you to buy the baseball cap, t-shirt, get engaged, go to your city council meetings, we need everybody to get active. This issue is a core issue driving the chronic illness problem. It's an unaffordable problem, the numbers that we're spending on healthcare. And, there's so much human suffering and we need to go after it. And now is the perfect time. We've never, in the 16 years that I've been an activist on this, there's never been a more perfect time to really bring a lawsuit and so.
Beautiful presentation. All three of you. Thank you very much. It's not an issue that I think many of us have spoken about. We will come back to it because I want to talk about the overall, the larger, the macro technological solution to what's going on here, which is something we really need to look at. And your group is 704 No More. Julie Levine, I know you've moved around. Can you tell us real quickly? And then we want to move on to our next topic. And I don't know where Lee Felsenstein is. I hope he's on. Go ahead, Julie.
To say a lot very quickly. First of all, Harvey, I adore you. I so appreciate that you can connect the dots and leave sort of traditional politics aside. Secondly, I am a major supporter of this lawsuit. I really hope people will consider supporting it in different ways, including, of course, financially. There's a way to target it, even if you don't want to give to CHD for political reasons, whatever your point of view. This is something that I think transcends the issue, and you can target it 100% to giving to the litigation, and they're going to find a constitutional lawyer, and Scott's fantastic. So that's pretty much what I want to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julie. I know you've been totally active on this issue and tortured. When people tell me that, this and that, I know that both you and Camilla have suffered very tangibly from electromagnetic radiation. And given my a history with nuclear power, we've seen a very similar pattern here. With low-level radiation and fallout from the nuclear tests, where the Navy actually came in and Dr. Ernest Sternglass came out and said that the atomic bomb tests, the fallout, were affecting SAT scores, and everybody laughed at him. And then the Navy came in and did a study and confirmed exactly what he said. So, we have a history of this cross-culturally. Camilla, do you want to wrap this up?
Well, I would really like to be able to put a summary of the 704 No More initiative in the chat, but I'm unable to do that.
All right, we'll figure it out. I will put out a piece. You can email me the stuff, and I'll write about it, and we'll put it up on the internet. And that way,
or can you just make me a co-host so that I can post it?
Yeah, you are co-host unless you have two instances in here. You can drag a document into the chat.
Oh, I can. Okay, then I'm going to do that right now. And please, everybody, take it, pass it around, share it, and contact us. Be in touch with me and with Miriam Eckenfels, who leads the project for Children's Health Defense. Let me just pull it up right now.
Thank you all for your great work on this. We really appreciate it. We still have 90 people with us. It's phenomenal. We want to go to our next topic, which is also asking for action. We're supposed to have Lee Felsenstein with us. I don't see him on, but maybe I'm missing it. But we'll discuss it anyway. So the four of you, Julie, Camilla, Scott, you all were really great, and we will come back to this. So we'll look at your paper, and we'll do a deeper dive on this issue when we can.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, everybody. No nukes on that. And like I said, I'm particularly sensitive to this issue because A, I hate those cell towers. B, they put one in my school where my kids were, and I could not beat them. It really got me mad. And the amount of disinformation coming in was terrible. And they were in Bexley Public High School for 2 years with the cell phone on the roof. It drove me crazy. And so we will deal with this. Camilla, you're a treasure. Julie, you too, and we'll keep at this.
And I know, Harvey, you also wanted to hear about dirty electricity, and Richard Lear happens to be an expert in dirty electricity.
Well, let's come back to that another time. Can we do that?
Okay.
Will you come back?
I want to address this with Camilla while she's on, and also if Lee isn't on now, it's better. I mean, we're at the hour. It's better, I think, to take it up next week. Okay, since we're so late. If Lee isn't
I do want to get it going a little bit, and then we'll be fine.
Okay. I just wanted to say that on one of your earlier shows, Sluggo, a couple or 3 years ago, we were discussing this, and there was a woman doctor whose entire client base was autoimmune diseases. And what she did, and it was over a course of years, she had over 500 clients, as I remember this right. And she heard the symptoms of each person, but she established a protocol where she would not take a real medical inventory until they all went on an EMF fast for 6 weeks. When they just would get off social media, they would do landline stuff rather than wireless stuff. And when people came back in 6 weeks, she said over 75% of the people, the symptoms of the autoimmune disease had completely disappeared.
That's
before
awesome.
She even took the history again and sent them home healthy.
I have to tell you,
Remember that, Harvey? Do you remember
I
that?
wear an Aura ring that's actually you can put on airplane mode, so it's not transmitting. But I wear it, and it's been fascinating to see it measures all these biomarkers, and one of them is your sleep quality and many different aspects of your sleep quality. And it is astounding to see how bad. Well, how much sleep improves when you are not in wireless. It is the ring tells a story, and there's some people doing a research study on this now, and they're actually looking for funding for it. But it's
I happen to this thing that I wear every day is made by a company, by a couple that makes the purest form of spirulina on the planet. And they work with Russian scientists and quantum infuse this or something. It protects you from EMF to a radius of about 15 feet around. So, people are using all kinds of these things anyway, because just being online, and I have a cell phone right here next to me. I don't do this anymore. I don't put it in my pocket anymore. I try to keep a little bit of distance.
Well, some of these things can definitely support resilience, but I can assure you that when you are in a high power exposure, I've never seen a device, even the one that I use that I think is one of the best is a Q-Link. They're not good. They're not good enough. So they're going to help you in general. And I don't like it when people want to rely on these things and think that, oh, I'm safe now, so I can be in a wireless environment and have all my Alexas and around my home. And it's like people are being deceived that that these are making them safe. So really, we need to go after the big issue, which is those cell towers and the exposure guidelines. Everybody wants to protect themselves and focus on themselves, but we need to focus on the core issues that are driving the incredible antenna proliferation and antenna densification in our midst today. So,
yeah, no, you're right. There's one about a tower about 300 feet. And when I get online here, where I'm living right now, there's about 100 people with their cell phone things, right? As I see on my computer, when I go to click my Wi-Fi, it's everywhere.
Yes, it is. And that's interesting. And we do want to deal with some more health issues. Camilla, in a week or two, if you'll come back, I actually wanted to talk about fluoridization of water, which I support getting rid of. I read books about this before, and there are other health issues, for better or worse, and they're going to come up with Kennedy. And let's see how this all goes. If there's a federal government left to do anything, that'll all be very interesting. So we will proceed with it. And I do want to talk at a future date about the health issues surrounding certain renewable energy technologies, particularly the assertion that solar panels cause EMF, which has been disputed.
They do. No, they definitely create dirty electricity, and it can definitely be filtered out.
It can be, yes. So we want to deal with that.
Don't know about it most of the time.
Right.
So they do it.
Well, the point is, if you have panels on your rooftop, the electricity needs to go through the battery, and then there are the issues of bird kill on windmills I want to talk about, and also we just had a major accident, very bad, near Tatanka at Moss Landing with a battery facility, and my buddies in Western Mass beat a battery facility in Western Mass, but we need some sort of backup going forward. And we also had a lot of lithium problems with the electric cars that were burned in the fires here in LA. So these are all peripheral issues that are pretty important and that we need to deal with. So Camille, let's plan on 2 weeks. We'll have you back, Julie. You'll be with us, and we'll deal with a lot more of these issues. It will be really
I
good.
love the way that you're willing to look at all the problems, looking at an issue comprehensively. You're excited about solar. There are great benefits. It's really important, but you want to hear about the dirty electricity. You want to integrate understanding of that and find solutions, and on the wind issue as well. So you are great.
But we don't want to go around, we don't want to install 100 million solar panels and then find out there's a health problem.
Right.
We don't want to do that. We do want to install 100 million solar panels, but we got to make sure that we're not screwing up the houses that we put the panels on. And the same, I'll tell you, here's an example. It's very important. I don't think Lee is with us, but we will go on to this. This is a very important thing that happened, actually monumental. When Jerry Brown was governor the first time, they put the first serious wind farm at Altamont Pass, where the Rolling Stones had that horrible concert. And these were small. Well, at the one time they weren't, but 50, 100, 150 kilowatt wind machines. They're small. They had lattice towers, and the blades went fast. So nobody figured beforehand that with lattice work towers, birds of prey will perch. And if the windmill's going fast, they were flying into the windmills. It was killing a lot of birds. This is where the whole thing started. A Sierra Club referred to them as Cuisinarts for birds. When Jerry Brown came back the second time, and I had a big argument at I used to go to wind power conferences, and I had a big argument with the company that had them. And I said, you can't keep operating these windmills. There's nothing wrong. So Jerry came back, he got those windmills taken out, and they put in bigger, slower, safer windmills at Altamont Pass. It was a big fight, but he followed up on it. So we have to be careful with this stuff. Turns out, and I'll leave it at this, that most windmills are 3 blades into the wind. If you paint one of the blades black, that's all you do. You paint one of the 3 blades back, the wind keel drops 40%. So we need to look at stuff like that. We'll do this in 2 weeks. We'll have you back.
And Harvey, I don't know. I worked in the solar industry with Tom Hayden back in the 70s. We didn't know the health problems at that time that we have now. But by the time I came back in the solar industry in the 2000s, we already knew that it was the inverters that were the main problem, and there were changes you could make in the inverters, and the people who had major problems, they just disappeared once, DC and AC.
Yeah.
It's a technology you need that releases dirty energy, and so when you get rid of that, you alleviate most of the problem.
Actually, Richard Lear developed filters that you can put in the outlets in your home, or you can spend a couple $1,000s to get an inverter put on your house.
Well, let's have him and you back with Julie. It's always great to see you, Julie, in a couple of weeks, and we'll deal with this. So we'll put you on the schedule for that. Okay? And thank you. Great presentation, you guys. Really, really terrific.
Thank you so much for your interest.
You're welcome. There will be a transcription available if you want to do that as well. So you can make you that way. And everybody look up your paper, as I will, and we'll see where we're at. Fantastic, really fantastic session. Mimi and then I want to briefly talk about what we thought we were going to talk about, and then we'll be out of time. It's 4:03 California time. Mimi, Spreadwell, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Sorry, I had to step away. So, did you all get to talk about the Moss Landing plant and fire a lot, or no?
No, we have not, and we will in 2 weeks. That's a very disturbing situation.
Can I give you all a super quick update?
Of course.
Okay, because we discussed this in Indivisible California Climate Justice, and what had happened is there was previously a bill that greatly sped up, did not need CWICA and CEQA and all that for these plants. And so that got bypassed. And so the Board of Supervisors there, I have a good friend that lives down there in Monterey who filled me in on this. And so just a couple days ago, last week, the Board of Supervisors unanimously voted not to reopen this plant until the highest standard of safety was being used in that plant. And so, and then yes. And she was disappointed that, there was a mess getting the proper people over there to test. So I know it was eventually some San Jose State folks that went and took tests at the Elkhorn Slough there. And the rates of contamination were hundreds times of normal, unfortunately. So this is an unfolding situation, and the representative there, it's Representative Dawn Addis, is that she has put forward a bill for more stringent guidelines for these battery plants, and she's also the bill author for the Make Polluters Pay Superfund bill, which I'm probably going to lead for Indivisible California. Thank you so much.
Mimi, if you could get that lead sponsor to join us, that would be great. It sounds like she's doing amazing things.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
And my understanding is that the Moss Landing battery facility essentially blew up or burned, spreading lithium all over the place. But there's another one at Morro Bay, and then it needs to be made safe, for God's sakes. So all right, we're going to proceed with this. So 2 weeks from now, we'll do a big deep dive on technology in our age and deal with these problems. And we'll see where Robert Kennedy comes down on all this. It'll be very interesting. All right, fantastic session, you guys. we're down to the last 10 minutes here, or 14. We still have 77 people with us. And I do want to mention that we had discussed previously, and it gets various levels of acceptance and or hostility, the idea of linking people up at the big rallies that we know are coming. And ironically, of course, one of the great tools we're thinking about is cell phones. So, Matthew Muncy has joined us with us. But MYLA, you had a hand on this. Let me see if I can unmute you.
I can unmute myself.
All right, go ahead.
I wanted to pivot for a second before we end, and I'm just wondering, I participated in the economic boycott last Friday. Did we get any news at all about if that had any kind of an impact?
Well, I think Elon Musk went bankrupt and is actually homeless now. Everybody's wish dream. No, I haven't seen any follow-up on it.
We still haven't counted the votes yet.
Yeah, that's right. We still haven't counted votes from the 24 election. So, Mimi, you threw your hand back up real quick. Did you want to say something about this?
Yes, I wanted to say something about the other protests, because also over the weekend, there was a very large and very successful Protect Our National Parks and National Forests at noon at every park around the country. There was a huge group at Tahoe because of Doge and Muskrat wanting to lay off staffers. Right. And so the same friend of mine, we were talking about at the next protest that we would have, I wasn't able to go, she wasn't able to go, but that we would go to one of these national parks and speak with people in small groups about what's going on and why we want to protect our parks. So I was thinking, that's something this group could possibly organize, because that is a nationwide effort. And that was
here's the question. Were the people at these rallies somehow linked together so that there's follow-up? Now, this was in Lee Felsenstein's book, that we do these demonstrations, people show up, they have a good time, basically a photo op. Everybody tries to calculate how many people were there, but then people go home and they're not necessarily linked up. So now people have said, well, people are already doing this and it's not something we need to look at. But how effectively were the people who were at these rallies linked together for future action? Do we have any idea? Deafening silence. Mimi, do you have any feedback on how people were linked up? This we're going to have to discuss further.
I wasn't able to go, like I said, and neither was my friend, but it was folks who followed the Alt National Park social media accounts, and they're the ones that put this forward. And also the different national parks have created their own, some of them have created their own alts as well. And I haven't looked for it yet, but I know it was reported on my local CBS News, and there was a large group at Yosemite, for example. But again, like I said, it was my local news. And people showed up at the Presidio. I talked about that last night because folks had signs that said, "We don't want a king," So, and I suggested to start using that king language. Nobody wants a king. So I don't know what kind of follow-up there was, but I think that's what my friend had in mind, to have these small talking circles about what's going on. Thank you.
We wanted Martin Luther King, but not this king. But the point here is, if people can follow up now, Mimi, I'd love to hear any feedback we can get from these rallies that just happened on were people linked together, were names taken, what kind of building.
She doesn't know, though. She doesn't know, but yeah.
Mike Hersh, go ahead. Do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, well, Steve first.
Go ahead, Steve, and then Mike. Steve Caruso.
Why am I here? I didn't have.
Okay.
Sorry about that then.
Nicole Ung was up.
Oh, yeah, Nicole, yes.
Nicole, do you have something on this real quick?
Yes, I went to the Tesla demonstration and I connected with people who organized it, Indivisible, and also I think Democratic Party, and I was able to get several demonstrators to join our group here and PDA, and the best thing is that those people got involved with calling to help the Florida 01 district, Florida 06, and we need people to help with New York 21, all those seats that are in red areas.
Yeah, thank Nicole. Nicole, this is a nonpartisan Zoom, so we can't do that organizing. But it's great that you were able to make a connection. How were you able to do that with the people who showed up?
I just went to talk to them. I went to talk. I asked for who was the organizer, and they gave me their contacts. And then there were some people that came from a different county, and I told them that we have to demonstrate not just in front of the Capitol, we have to demonstrate in front of the offices of the senators at different locations and bring the fight right to them.
Okay, so Nicole, obviously you're a go-getter, and it's been great having you on our calls. The question then becomes, and I guess we're going to have to discuss this next week, is what did these people who organize these rallies, which are very effective in their way, have a way of mass following up with all the people that showed up? What, you know, the people came, they had a good time, they made their point, and then they went home. What happens next? Do we use cell phones to tie people together, or QR codes? What's the method?
Let's see if anybody has an answer real quick. Deb, if you would like to share with us.
Yes, there's an indivisible group in Broward County, Florida, that we have a separate signal group that we communicate for any actions that are going on in terms of demonstrating, especially right now at the Tesla.
Here's where I'm writing. Too much I find truly.
Somebody's talking.
I got my hand.
Yeah. Well,
okay,
Deb,
that's really good. But what we're trying to figure out isn't how to get people out to the demonstrations. We're trying to figure out what to do with them once they're there, when the sun sets and everybody goes home, how we knit together. But that was very informative. Robert, if you have some insights for us real quick.
Well, actually, what I had was a question to the gentleman who was speaking earlier. He mentioned that medallion that he was wearing that seemed to produce some sort of shield from EMFs. I'm just wondering if he's still on, if he could put a link to where we can find out information on that.
Thank you, Robert. Tatanka, if you could drop that information, and we can also get that spirulina as well. Good question. Hey, you know, whatever works.
Why not?
We got to fight back against all these.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, Tatanka. Mimi, do you have something else for us right now?
Yes, for the local Tesla protests, we have a local Silicon Valley burners Google group where we discussed it a lot, and also our local Indivisible helped organize, and they did have a mobilize link to sign up. So that's what they did there. And we also have a local human rights organization that's a larger coalition. They're called Human Agenda, and they also sponsored.
Well, Mimi, how did they follow up? Right. You're getting right to the heart of the matter.
Exactly.
I don't know exactly how they followed up, but I knew they were encouraging signups through Mobilize.
Can you find out? Because
through
we
Mobilize,
want to exchange tech specs for people who are doing rallies in terms of how they follow up with the people who show up.
May I say something else really quickly as well? Is that
I had go to Dr. Ruth. Yes, go ahead.
I had emailed some of you during. I had to go to an appointment. I'm sorry, but there's an alternative working family party State of the Union talk tomorrow with a Working Families Party elected lady. So may I put
if you could just drop that link in the chat, that would be super. Thank you. You're terrific.
It's been close to me, but I'll try and do that.
Thank you.
Well, send it to one of the co-hosts, and we'll get it out there. Thank you.
We're down to the wire here.
Yeah. Coley in the queue. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So there's going to be a protest at the Tesla office. I believe it's on the 3rd Street Promenade or near there. And if you go to Justice for Palestine, they should have it. And if people want to email me or whatever, I'll try to find out about it. But the thing that I wanted to say is I am on Mozilla browser. It's wonderful. Every single day they call about 12 articles from all over. You can store them. They're always excellent. And sorry for those of you who are heavily invested in the stock market, but yay, the Dow just dropped 650 points because Trump said his tariffs would start tomorrow.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Ruth.
Thank you, Dr.
I
Ruth.
think, when that kind of stuff starts happening, maybe people will wake up.
Well, the one thing that I think the turning point, the biggest thing to watch now is the market. The last thing that people in the market and in major corporations want is instability and unpredictability. And if we've seen anything from the last, few months, it's certainly been that. We got 4 minutes. Vina Colley, you had your hand up, and then Deb. Anybody else want to get a comment in? We're going to sign off at 4:20. So please jump in real quick. Vina Colley, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for letting me on here. And I have a question. The studies that they've been doing is sort of going back to times from the bulletin of the Bureau of Standards. And so they haven't changed any standards on our exposures since back in the 70s. So this is one problem that we have to figure out how much exposures people are getting. So they need to look at this Bulletin of Bureau of Standards and how they started to get these standards. And I do have a thing from Chris Busby, who's done a cancer study, and how
could you come back in a couple weeks when we revisit this, because we're on our way out and we do not have enough time to get into it. But you sound
thank you,
very
Vina.
informative, and we need your expertise. So could you please come back in a couple weeks when we can really do another deep dive into this, because it's just a matter of time.
Okay, excellent. 2 weeks. Vina, always great to have you with us. Scott O'Connell, then Deb Schindler, and then we're going to hit the road. Scott, you're good. Go ahead, Scott.
Hello, first time on the call. I caught a video from Odette Wilkins, I think it was. I think it was her from a few months ago. She was really, really knowledgeable, and so were the other people. Anyway, a lot of people were talking about solutions. You told this, the shungite and all that stuff's not going to work with real powerful stuff, but there are things that will work. There are other things that generate fields that counter it. One would be a Tesla biohealer, a Faraday cage that's grounded, properly done. You have to ground it, a separate ground that you're doing. So there's a couple of ways, not time to do it now. But if you
come back in 2 weeks, Scott.
I will, but put an email address in the chat and I'll give you a little more info.
Okay, thank you so much. Last caller here, Deb Schindler, and then we're going to rock and roll. Deb, go ahead.
Just to finish up what I was trying to explain, the group has an ongoing chat. We have email, we have Zoom meetings, and an ongoing chat following up with every single action that we take in terms of protesting. So it's a constant contact.
Well, good. And next week, we do want to talk one of the questions again. When you have a big rally, how do you tie people up and together so they don't go home and nothing happens further? We're out of time. Thank you so much, Camilla, Julie, all you guys. Amazing. It's always an amazing 2 hours and 2 hours and 20 minutes. And we will be back next week. And in 2 weeks, we'll do a deep scientific dive. So everybody needs to study up on your science texts from high school. Okay, everybody, big hugs. No nukes, and we will see you next week. We're going to again visit this question of tying people up, and we got so much together at the rallies, and we got so much else to talk to. No nukes, everybody. We'll see you next week.
No nukes, and we